Good day, class. Welcome to Rest 11 Methods of Research. We are still here at Unit 4, writing of the Chapter 3 of your proposal. We are specifically at the sampling design of your study. So we are done with research design and locale of the study. Now we go to your uh, sampling design. Please change the respondents to sampling design. So sampling design is still have that term design. It's still a design, so it is a framework or roadmap that serves as the basis of the selection of a survey sample and affects many other important aspects of a survey as well. So it's a basis. Again, it could be construction gone wrong for this one, or if there is something wrong with the sampling, it will affect the generalization and the results and the analysis of the study. So you need to have this sampling design for accuracy of your data. So why do we do sampling? So sampling is a process of selecting only a portion of the whole population, only a portion of that, so that inferences about the population can be made. So it is actually convenient to have multiple observations from the population rather than go around and test everybody in the population. So this is done to, number one, reduce cost, of course, that will reduce cost, and for greater speed, of course, unlike if you test or interview all the people or respondents in the population compared to getting only a sample. Next is for greater scope. You can test, let's say, each group of indigenous people if you only use samples from the larger population. And lastly, for greater accuracy. So sample therefore has been drawn from the population, and the sample should be representative sample so we can generalize it to the larger population. Hence the need for sampling technique, because if the sample is not a representative of the general population, there will be a problem in generalizing the results of the study. So we have a mind map again here for your sampling design. And again, this will be discussed in more detail in a separate video. I will touch each a bit only. And we have here your sample technique is divided into three groups. We have the method, the size, and the process. And uh, the method here is the decision on which technique to use. So I'm sure this has been taught to you either in your practical research or in your statistics. We have probability and non-probability sampling. In probability sampling, we have simple random uh, sampling, systematic, stratified, cluster. And for non-probability, we have convenience, quota, purposive, snowball, and your theoretical. Next, for your size, the size refers to calculating the sample size. How big should your sample be? And finally, the process, this refers to any procedures used in selecting or grouping individuals. And from the population of interest, it should be noted that the first of two situations in the mind maps where a decision is required from each of the branches rather than following a single branch to its conclusion. In other words, defining a sample requires information from the method, size, and process branches. So you will not only choose the method part and or the size part or the process. You should have those three before you can define your sample. So for method, you have probability and non-probability sampling. In probability sampling, this is you have or you give chance to each member of the population to be part of your sample. Unlike your non-probability sampling, you don't give equal chances for everyone to be part of your sample. For the simple random sampling, if this is your population, you just randomly select respondents from the population. So this way, you can use the lottery method or the fishbowl method, or you can use the calculator method. And for systematic, it's the same as the simple random sampling, but you do it systematically. So you choose, for example, the second, fourth, sixth, eighth, ninth, 10th, and so on until you fulfill your sample size in selecting your samples. For the stratified random sampling, you have actually a strata. So you have groups for this one, and you select from each of the strata. So it's either divided into two or more strata, and the aim to this sampling is to enhance representativeness. So this design subdivides the population into homogeneous subsets from which an appropriate number of elements are selected at random. And then you have your cluster sampling. In cluster sampling, this is quite different. You have certain you still have groups, but in one group, you have a combination of different respondents. So this is actually can be used for geographical clusters. For example, we have district 1, 2, 3, 4, and you will just choose this cluster or this sample, district 3. So you can also do that. That's cluster sampling. And for non-probability, wherein there is no equal chances to be part of the sample, we have census. You are familiar with census, like census, house to house. And convenience or haphazard, this is selecting a sample based on the availability of the member and or proximity to the researcher. So it's also known as accidental, opportunity, or grab sampling. For the purposive sampling, this is called judgmental sampling, and these samples are chosen based on the goals of the study. So they may be chosen based on their knowledge. They may be the experts here, or they satisfy the traits or conditions set by the researcher, the inclusion criteria. Okay, and for quota sampling or the representative sampling, this is a proportion of the groups in the population were considered in the number and selection of the respondents. So if your sample size is, let's say, 30, okay, when you've interviewed already 30, that is already your quota, you're done with it. So this is quota sampling. And then snowball sampling, this is a chain referral or reputational sampling. This is where participants in the study were tasked to recruit or tell the researcher other members of the study. So these are used actually for those studies that is hard to find participants. For example, the usual example for this one is if you are um, interviewing HIV positive respondents. So you will ask them if they know others who have who are also HIV positive. Next is we have the sample size, and the sample size refers to calculating it. And from your practical research and statistics, you may have learned some formula, and usually I seek the help of Excel or other applications or even a statistician for the computation of this sample size. Let me show you examples of what we have had used in our researches for sample size computation. So we have here one application to compute for your sample size. It's called your Rao-Solve calculator, and you can use that, but it will ask you for the margin of error, the confidence level, the population size, and what is the response distribution. So you can use this to calculate your sample size. For the paper that we propose for the Department of Health, we use this Lynch formula for selecting how many samples should we use, should we take in each strata or in each indigenous group. So you will see that I use Excel here, and you just put also the level of significance, the largest proportion, the total population, and then it will automatically give me how many should I get from each strata or from each IP group. Also, there are other sampling methods that does not need any computation, like your Newman's table. So it will just tell you that if you have 1,000 population, you get 30% of the population. If you have 10,000, you get 10%. And if you have 150,000 in the population, you get 1% of the population. And that's it. And that's your sample size. But since undergrad, there is this famous formula that we've been using for sample computation, and you may have heard of this already, your Slovin's formula or the Slovin's method, wherein Slovin is small n is equal to big N over 1 plus NE squared, where this one is your sample size, this one is your population size, and here is the margin of error. So you can see here the margin of error. I still also have here, this is the level of significance here, but this one is margin of error. This is your Slovin's formula. So next is the process. This is actually describing your eligibility criteria for your respondents. So the sampling process refers to the procedure used in selecting or grouping individuals from the population of interest. So you will see here that you have your eligibility criteria, your inclusion and exclusion criteria. So how do we write the sampling design? So number one, define the population. For example, my population or indigenous people, I need to state my inclusion criteria or the eligibility in this part. Number two, you need to identify the sampling frame. This sampling frame is listing of population from which a sample is chosen. So a sampling unit can be anything that exists within the population of interest. For example, sampling unit or a construction unit, or it may be an individual unit. So for my example here, the sampling frame came from Department of Health. It's a list of identified GIDA IP barangays of Cagayan Province. And you will see here that I've defined my population. You will see here the respondents for the survey shall be mothers from the different indigenous groups in the province of Cagayan, and respondents who will be included in the study are mothers who, letter A, are Malaweg, Yapayao, Itaves, Agtas, or Ibanag. Letter B, have child or children aged 0 to 5 years. Letter C, and must be residing in the area for at least 1 year. And letter D, not part of the key informant interview. Third is selecting a sampling method. So you can choose either probability sampling or non-probability sampling. And choosing a sampling method is critical because you need to choose a sampling technique that will give you a well-represented sample that can be generalized to your population. So in our study, we use a multi-stage proportionate stratified random sampling methodology. So it's too much, it's very long. Later you will see why it is a multi-stage stratified random sampling method. Then next is determine the sample size. This is the most critical stage of the sample design process because the sample size should not be excessively large nor it should be too small. It is desired that the sample size should be optimum and it should be representative of the population and should give reliable results. That's why we need to put into consideration population variance, population size, the parameters of interest, and the budgetary constraints as factors that impact the sample size. So you will see here in the example, the sample size was calculated using a Lynch formula for calculating the sample size with a confidence interval and margin of error of 95% and 5% respectively. So shown is the computation. So finally, execute the sample process. So after defining the population, the sampling frame, and then the sampling method, and then the sample size, you now execute it. So you will see here, after doing steps 1 to 4, we have this paragraph. The IP barangays of Cagayan province are sorted by strata or IP groups. 30 municipalities were included to obtain a sample size, and the municipality with the greatest number of households of a specific IP group per stratum was selected, and the total number of indigenous households per stratum was summated and divided by the number of indigenous households in the province to give the sampling fraction. And researchers then will employ proportional allocation and stratified random sampling in choosing the respondents of the study in the select barangay. So that's why this one is called a multi-stage stratified random sampling, because there's a lot of stages, not only one stage in choosing your respondents. And here you see the total would be the sample size computed in the previous PowerPoint slide. So of course, techniques that can be used in doing your sample design is, again, use your review of related literature, check in the articles similar to your study, and read and list down the sampling design used here. And again, use a template to see the pros and cons in using this sampling design. So how long should this part be? So in the slides before this, it's only a part of one study. So all those paragraphs are in just one sampling design. So that means that you could have as many paragraphs as you can have for the sampling design, and you need to be very specific on your sampling. So in this video, we talked about what a sampling design is, what is the importance of sampling design, and how do we write this part of chapter 3. So that's it for this part. Thanks for watching.